A tired waitress helped a rude customer, never knowing he was a food critic who would make her a star. This thought echoed in Maya's mind as she stared at the magazine cover bearing her smiling face. 6 months ago, such a headline would have seemed impossible. Back then, she had been just another exhausted server struggling to make ends meet in a city that seemed determined to break her. The fluorescent lights of Carlisle's diner flickered above Maya's head, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Her feet throbbed inside her waitress shoes, the cheap material offering little support after her double shift. 11 hours on her feet and still 3 more to go. The weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders, making each step a deliberate act of will. "Order up for table 7. Lou, the cook, shouted through the service window, his voice gruff from decades of cigarettes and late nights. Maya tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and reached for the plates, wincing as her fingers brushed against the hot ceramic. The small burn was just another sensation to ignore, another pain to file away with the others. The ache in her lower back, the blister forming on her heel, the dull throb at her temples that never quite went away. "Coming through?" she murmured, balancing 3 plates along her arm with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this job far too long. At 28, Maya had spent nearly a decade serving others, watching her dreams of culinary school fade with each passing year. Dreams couldn't pay the rent or her mother's medical bills. Outside, rain pelted against the windows, distorting the neon signs of downtown into watercolor smears. The weather had kept most customers away, leaving the diner unusually quiet for a Thursday evening. Maya was grateful for the respite, though the manager had already warned her that slow nights meant cutting staff early. She couldn't afford to lose those hours. She set the plates down at table 7, a young couple too absorbed in each other to notice her presence, and moved to check on her other tables. That's when the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new arrival. The man who entered shook water from his expensive-looking coat, his expression sour as he surveyed the diner. Even from across the room, Maya could tell he was different from their usual clientele. His posture spoke of confidence, perhaps arrogance, and his clothing, though now dampened by rain, clearly cost more than she made in a month. "Seat yourself anywhere," she called out, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He chose a booth by the window, as far from other patrons as possible. Maya grabbed a menu and made her way over, noting how he busied himself with his phone, not bothering to look up as she approached. "Welcome to Carlisle's. Can I start you with something to drink?" Her voice carried the practiced cheerfulness that had become second nature. "Coffee. Black." He didn't look up from his screen. "Coming right up," Maya replied, waiting a moment to see if he might acknowledge her. When he didn't, she turned and headed for the coffee pot, her smile falling away. As she poured his coffee, she watched him from behind the counter. He appeared to be in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and sharp features. There was something vaguely familiar about him, though she couldn't place it. Perhaps he was a local businessman or politician. Whatever his story, his demeanor made it clear he didn't want to be here. When she returned with his coffee, he finally looked up, his eyes, a startling blue, meeting hers briefly before returning to the menu. "Ready to order?" Maya asked, pen poised over her notepad. "What's good here?" His tone suggested he doubted anything would be. Maya hesitated. The truthful answer was, not much. Carlisle's was a typical greasy spoon with mediocre food at best. But Lou took pride in a few dishes, and she wasn't about to insult the place that kept her afloat, however barely. "The meatloaf is Lou's specialty, and the apple pie is homemade." The man's mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. "I'll have the meatloaf then. And a side salad?" "Good choice." Maya collected the menu. "I'll put that right in for you." As she walked away, she felt his eyes on her back. Something about his gaze made her straighten her posture despite her fatigue. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of routine tasks. Maya delivered food, refilled drinks, and cleared tables, all while keeping an eye on the man by the window. When his food arrived, she noticed how he examined each component with unusual scrutiny before taking a bite. She was wiping down a nearby table when she heard him call out, "Excuse me, waitress?" Maya approached his table, noting that he'd barely touched his food. Her heart sank. A complaint would mean involving the manager and possibly having to comp the meal, which would inevitably be blamed on her. "Is everything all right with your meal, sir? This is cold." He gestured to the meatloaf, and over-seasoned. "I can't eat this." Maya's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. I can take it back and have the kitchen remake it, or I can bring you something else entirely. Just bring me the check for the coffee." His voice was clipped, dismissive. "Of course. I'm really sorry about the food." She reached for his plate, but he stopped her with a raised hand. "Leave it. I want your manager to see it." Maya's stomach twisted. She needed this job, and customer complaints never ended well, especially when they involved management. "I'll get that check for you right away." As she returned to the register, Maya felt a wave of despair wash over her. She was too tired for this, too worn down by life's constant barrage of small indignities. The man's rudeness was just one more in a long line of daily humiliations. She printed his check, $2.75 for the coffee, and returned to his table, placing it face down beside him. "Here you are. Again, I apologize about the meatloaf." He looked up at her then, really looked at her for the first time. His eyes traveled over her face, taking in the dark circles beneath her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the weariness etched into every feature. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across his expression. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, his tone marginally softer. The question caught her off guard. "Almost 4 years." "And before that?" Maya hesitated, unsure why he was asking. "Other diners. A cafe downtown that closed? I've been in food service since high school." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Do you enjoy it?" A bitter laugh nearly escaped her lips, but Maya swallowed it down. "It pays the bills. Most of them, anyway." The man reached for his wallet and extracted a credit card, placing it atop the check without looking at the amount. As Maya took it, their fingers brushed briefly. She noticed a small scar across his knuckles, the kind that came from an old kitchen injury. She'd seen enough of them on Lou's hands to recognize it. "I'll be right back with your receipt." When she returned, the man was staring out the window at the rain-slicked street, his expression contemplative. Maya placed the receipt and his card on the table, expecting him to leave immediately. Instead, he surprised her by asking, "What would you do if you weren't waiting tables?" The question hung in the air between them, oddly intimate coming from a stranger who had been nothing but rude. Maya should have given a polite, dismissive answer and moved on to her other tables. But something, perhaps the lateness of the hour, or the bone-deep exhaustion, or maybe just the unexpectedness of his interest, made her answer honestly. "I'd cook. Not here." She gestured around the diner. "But somewhere I could create real food. I had plans for culinary school once, but..." She trailed off, suddenly aware that she was sharing too much with someone who'd shown no kindness to her. The man nodded again, his expression unreadable. He signed the receipt, gathered his belongings, and stood. "Thank you for the coffee." Maya watched him walk toward the door, his gait confident despite the slight limp in his right leg. Just before exiting, he paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rainy night. Only when she went to clear his table did Maya discover he'd left a $100 tip on a $2.75 check. Beneath the tip line, he'd written in precise handwriting, "For culinary school dreams." Her hands trembled as she held the receipt, convinced it must be a mistake. She rushed to the door, scanning the street for any sign of him, but the sidewalk was empty, the rain washing away any trace of where he might have gone. Later that night, as Maya soaked her aching feet in her tiny apartment bathroom, she found herself thinking about the strange man and his unexpected generosity. The $100 wouldn't change her life. It wouldn't even make a dent in her mother's medical bills, but it was the most meaningful tip she'd received in years. Not for the amount, but for the acknowledgement of her buried dreams. She hadn't told anyone about culinary school in so long that she'd almost forgotten it had once been her goal. The fact that she'd shared this with a rude stranger seemed absurd in retrospect. Yet something about him had drawn out that truth, had made her remember who she'd once hoped to be. Maya closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment to imagine a different life, one where she created food instead of just serving it, where her creative instincts found expression beyond rearranging the sad garnishes on Carlisle's plates. The fantasy was bittersweet, a luxury she rarely permitted herself. With a sigh, she pulled her feet from the lukewarm water and reached for a towel. Tomorrow would bring another double shift, another day of serving others while putting her own needs aside. One kind gesture, however unexpected, wouldn't change that reality. She couldn't have known then that the man with the blue eyes and the $100 tip would return, or that when he did, everything would change. 3 days later, the bell above Carlisle's door chimed just as Maya was beginning her afternoon shift. She looked up from filling salt shakers to see him standing there, the rude customer, now dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. Today there was no rain to dampen his appearance, no scowl to mar his features. Instead, he scanned the diner with purpose until his gaze landed on her. Maya froze, salt granules spilling onto the counter. Recognition flashed between them across the room, an electric current of connection. He approached the counter, moving with the same confident stride she remembered, though today his limp seemed less pronounced. "Hello again?" he said, his voice warmer than before. "I was hoping you'd be working." Maya wiped her salt-covered hands on her apron. "You came back. I didn't expect that after." She trailed off, unsure how to reference their previous interaction. "After I behaved poorly?" He offered a rueful smile. "Yes, well, I owe you an apology for that. And an explanation if you're willing to hear it." Before Maya could respond, Lou's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Maya, order up for table 4. I need to—" She gestured toward the kitchen. "Of course. I'll wait." He slid onto a stool at the counter, watching as she hurried to deliver plates to a family of 4. When she returned, he had placed a business card on the counter between them. Maya glanced down and felt her breath catch. The card was simple but elegant, bearing the name Alexander Reynolds, and underneath, Executive Editor, Taste of the City magazine. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. Alexander Reynolds, one of the most influential food critics in the city, known for his brutal honesty and the power to make or break restaurants with a single review. She'd seen his byline in magazines, had even read some of his reviews during quiet moments when customers left their reading materials behind. The words died in her throat. "Alex Reynolds." He extended his hand. "And you're Maya, according to your name tag." She shook his hand automatically, her mind still processing this revelation. "You're a food critic, and you came to Carlisle's." The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. "No wonder you hated the meatloaf." A smile touched the corners of his mouth. "I've eaten in worse places, believe me. But I wasn't here to review the food." "Then why?" Alex glanced around the diner, ensuring no one was within earshot. "I'm working on a special feature, Hidden Talent. The culinary gems working behind the scenes. It's about people with exceptional culinary potential who haven't had the opportunity to showcase their skills professionally." Maya frowned, confusion replacing her initial shock. "What does that have to do with me?" 3 months ago, I ate at the Riverside Cafe. The special that night was a butternut squash ravioli with brown butter sage sauce that was, he paused, searching for the right word, transcendent. Simple ingredients elevated to something remarkable. The chef wouldn't come out to receive compliments, but the server mentioned it was created by a waitress who occasionally helped in the kitchen. The memory hit Maya like a physical force. The Riverside Cafe had been her previous job, before budget cuts had forced them to let her go. The owner had occasionally allowed her to develop specials when their regular chef was overwhelmed. That ravioli dish had been her creation, one she'd practiced dozens of times in her tiny apartment kitchen until it was perfect. "That was you?" she whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. Alex nodded. "I tried to find you when I returned the following week, but you were gone." The manager wouldn't provide information about former employees, understandably. "I've been searching for Maya the waitress with the ravioli recipe ever since." Maya leaned against the counter, needing its support as the implications of his words sank in. "And you found me here? At Carlisle's? Pure coincidence. I ducked in to escape the rain that night, not expecting anything beyond mediocre coffee. Then I saw you, and something seemed familiar. I wasn't certain until you mentioned culinary school. So the rudeness was, what? A test?" Alex had the grace to look embarrassed. "Not intentionally. I was having a terrible day and I behaved poorly. But your response to my rudeness, your professionalism and grace under pressure, confirmed what I suspected. People who truly understand food service know how to handle difficult customers." Maya's mind raced, trying to process everything. Outside the diner windows, life continued as normal. Cars passed, pedestrians hurried by, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. But inside, her world had tilted on its axis. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Reynolds?" "Alex, please." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I want to feature you in my article. Interview you about your culinary background, your inspirations, your dreams. And more importantly, I want to taste your food, whatever you consider your signature dish. If it's anything like that ravioli, I have a feeling this could be the beginning of something significant for you." Maya's heart pounded in her chest. This was the kind of opportunity she'd stopped allowing herself to dream about years ago. Yet suspicion crept in alongside hope. Life had taught her that if something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Alex's expression softened. "Because talent should be recognized. Because the culinary world needs fresh voices. And because I remember what it's like to have potential without opportunity." He gestured to his right leg, the source of his limp. "I was a chef before I became a critic. An accident in the kitchen ended that career path, but I was lucky enough to find another way to stay in the food world. Not everyone gets that second chance." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Maya found herself wanting to believe him, wanting to trust that this impossible opportunity was real. "I don't have a kitchen," she said softly. "My apartment barely has a functioning stove. I have access to test kitchens, professional equipment, quality ingredients, everything you'd need." He pulled out a small notebook and wrote something down. "This Sunday, 3 o'clock. No pressure, just come and cook whatever represents you best." He tore out the page and slid it across the counter to her. "The address is there, along with my personal number if you have questions." Maya stared at the paper, her fingers trembling slightly as she picked it up. The address was in the upscale culinary district downtown, an area she typically only passed through on her bus route to work. "I don't know if I can—" "You can," Alex interrupted gently. "That ravioli wasn't a fluke. You have a gift, Maya. All I'm asking is that you share it." Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed again as new customers entered. Maya glanced over, then back at Alex. "I need to get back to work." He nodded, understanding. "Sunday, 3 o'clock. Just think about it." He stood, dropping a $10 bill on the counter for his untouched coffee. "The worst that happens is you get to cook in a professional kitchen for an afternoon." As he walked toward the door, Maya called after him. "Mr. Reynolds, Alex." He turned, eyebrows raised in question. "Thank you. For the tip the other night. It was kind." A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his features from merely handsome to something more approachable, more human. Kindness had nothing to do with it. "I'm investing in talent." With that, he pushed through the door and was gone. Maya tucked the paper with his address into her apron pocket, its presence a warm weight against her hip for the remainder of her shift. Each time she felt it there, a small flutter of possibility stirred in her chest, a sensation she'd almost forgotten. That night, she stood in her cramped kitchen, staring at the ingredients she'd purchased on her way home. A small chicken, lemons, fresh herbs that had cost more than she should have spent. She hadn't cooked properly in months, had nearly convinced herself that her culinary dreams were childish fantasies best forgotten. But as she began to work, hands moving with muscle memory through the familiar motions of breaking down the chicken, zesting the lemons, chopping herbs, something awakened inside her. A dormant part of herself stirred to life, reaching toward the light like a plant too long kept in darkness. By midnight, her tiny apartment was filled with the aroma of roasting chicken and herbs. Maya sat at her folding table, tasting the sauce she'd created, making mental notes about adjustments for Sunday. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps her life wasn't fixed on its current trajectory. Perhaps change was still possible. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled against the night sky. Somewhere out there was a professional kitchen where she would cook for Alexander Reynolds, food critic and unexpected catalyst for the reawakening of her dreams. Maya closed her eyes and savored the flavors on her tongue, already planning the dish that might change her life. Sunday arrived with a clarity of light that seemed prophetic. Maya stood outside the address Alex had given her, clutching a canvas bag filled with supplementary ingredients she'd insisted on bringing, despite his assurance that everything would be provided. Some items were simply too personal, too integral to her cooking to leave to chance. The building before her housed several culinary enterprises, a cooking school, a test kitchen for a major food publication, and a small event space for private dinners. Its glass and steel exterior gleamed in the afternoon sun, intimidating in its modernity and obvious exclusivity. Maya checked her phone. 2:52 p.m. She was early, as she'd intended to be. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that smelled of polished wood and subtle citrus. A security guard at the desk looked up as she approached. "I'm here to see Alexander Reynolds," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I believe he's expecting me." The guard checked a tablet. "Maya Diaz?" She nodded, offering her ID when he asked for it. After a brief call, he directed her to the elevators. "4th floor, suite 403. "Mr. Reynolds is waiting for you." The elevator ascended smoothly, its mirrored walls reflecting a woman Maya barely recognized. She'd spent extra time on her appearance today, pulling her dark hair into a neat bun, applying minimal makeup, and wearing her one good outfit, dark jeans and a crisp white button-down shirt she'd ironed twice. She looked professional, capable, though the shadows beneath her eyes betrayed her sleepless night. Suite 403 had no signage, just a simple plaque bearing the number. Maya knocked, her heart hammering against her ribs. The door swung open to reveal Alex, dressed more casually than she'd seen him before. Dark jeans, similar to her own, and a gray Henley pushed up at the sleeves. The informal attire somehow made him more intimidating rather than less. "Maya." His smile was warm, genuine. "Right on time. Come in." She stepped inside and stopped, momentarily stunned by the space. The test kitchen was a culinary dream, all stainless steel and pristine countertops, professional-grade equipment gleaming under recessed lighting. One wall was entirely windows, flooding the room with natural light and offering a view of the city skyline. "This is..." Words failed her. "A bit much?" Alex suggested, amusement in his voice. "The magazine shares this space with a few other publications. We use it for testing recipes, photo shoots, that sort of thing." Maya set her bag on the counter, fingers trailing reverently over the cool marble surface. "It's beautiful. It's a kitchen. The magic doesn't come from the equipment, it comes from the chef." He gestured toward her bag. "Speaking of which, what have you brought? I told you everything would be provided." Maya began unpacking her items, a small jar of preserved lemons she'd made months ago, a bottle of her homemade herb oil, a container of smoked salt. Some things can't be replaced with store-bought versions. Alex picked up the jar of preserved lemons, examining it with interest. "You made these?" She nodded, continuing to unpack. "My grandmother's recipe, with a few modifications. They take weeks to cure properly. Impressive dedication for someone working double shifts at a diner." Maya shrugged, though his recognition of her effort warmed her. "Cooking has always been my escape, I guess. Even when I don't have time or energy for much else, I make time for this." Alex studied her for a moment, a thoughtful expression on his face. "That's how you know it's your calling." He set the jar down and gestured to the rest of the kitchen. "Everything else you might need is here. Refrigerator is fully stocked, pantry through that door. Tools in the drawers beneath the island. Make yourself at home." Maya surveyed the space, mentally organizing her approach. "How much time do I have?" "As much as you need. The space is ours until evening." He moved toward a small desk in the corner. "I'll be over here working on some edits." "Pretend I'm not here until you're ready to serve." The concept seemed impossible. How could she forget the presence of a renowned food critic while she cooked? But Maya appreciated the attempt to reduce her pressure. She took a deep breath and began. First, she explored the refrigerator and pantry, noting available ingredients and adjusting her mental recipe accordingly. Then she gathered the tools she would need, familiarizing herself with the layout of this foreign kitchen. Finally, with methodical precision, she began her mise en place, the careful preparation and organization of ingredients that formed the foundation of professional cooking. As she worked, the outside world fell away. There was no diner, no overdue bills, no aching feet or exhausted sighs. There was only the rhythmic chopping of her knife, the sizzle of oil in a pan, the vibrant colors of fresh ingredients arranged before her. This was the meditative state cooking had always provided, the place where Maya felt most authentically herself. Occasionally, she glanced toward Alex, but true to his word, he remained absorbed in his work, giving her the space to create without an audience. The absence of scrutiny allowed her confidence to build with each step of the process. She had decided against recreating the butternut squash ravioli that had first caught his attention. Instead, she prepared a dish that spoke more intimately to her culinary identity, a roasted chicken with preserved lemon and herbs, served with a saffron-infused rice and seasonal vegetables, finished with her homemade herb oil. It was a refined elevation of the comfort food her grandmother had taught her to make as a child, sophisticated enough to showcase her technical skills, yet unpretentious in its soulful approach to flavor. The aroma filled the kitchen as Maya put the finishing touches on her plating. She stepped back, assessing the visual composition with a critical eye. The golden chicken skin glistened under the kitchen lights, the vibrant green herb oil creating an artistic contrast against the white plate. It wasn't perfect. There were elements she would have adjusted with more time or different ingredients, but it was honest. It was her. "I'm ready." she called softly, her voice cutting through the comfortable silence that had developed between them. Alex looked up from his work, removing his reading glasses and setting them aside. He approached the counter where Maya had plated the dish, his expression neutral but his eyes alert, taking in every detail. "Tell me about what you've made," he said, pulling up a stool to sit across from her. Maya took a breath, centering herself. "Roasted chicken with preserved lemon and herbs. The chicken is brined overnight, hypothetically since I only had this morning, then roasted with a compound butter under the skin. The preserved lemons add acidity and depth. I've served it with saffron rice and spring vegetables, finished with my herb oil." Alex nodded, picking up the cutlery she'd set beside the plate. "And why this dish? Of all the things you could have prepared today?" The question caught her slightly off guard. Maya had expected him to taste first, question later. "It's personal. My grandmother made a simpler version of this every Sunday. When she taught me to cook, this was the first special meal I learned. I've refined it over the years, incorporated techniques I've read about or seen, but the heart of it remains the same. Food with history, with meaning." Alex cut into the chicken, noting how the knife glided through the tender meat. He took a bite, his expression still carefully neutral. Maya held her breath, watching as he tasted, waiting for some reaction to cross his face. He took another bite, then another, methodically working through the components of the dish, occasionally closing his eyes as if to better focus on a particular flavor. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft clink of cutlery against porcelain. Maya's confidence began to waver. Had she misunderstood the assignment? Made something too simple, too pedestrian for someone with his sophisticated palate? Finally, Alex set down his fork and looked directly at her. The intensity of his gaze made her pulse quicken. "Do you know what separates a good cook from a great chef, Maya?" She shook her head, uncertain where he was going with this. "Technical skill can be taught. Flavor combinations can be learned. But the ability to tell a story through food, to convey emotion, memory, identity on a plate, that can't be taught, that's innate." He gestured to the half-eaten dish before him. "This tells me who you are, where you come from. What matters to you?" Maya blinked rapidly, fighting the sudden moisture in her eyes. "Is that good?" A smile broke across Alex's face, transforming his features. "It's exceptional. The technical execution is nearly flawless. The chicken is perfectly cooked, the balance of flavors is harmonious, the textures complement each other beautifully. But what makes this remarkable is the soul behind it. This is honest food, Maya. Personal food. The kind that makes dining transcendent rather than merely satisfying." Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by a pride she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the validation his assessment provided. Alex pushed his plate aside and leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "I want to feature you in my article, not just to mention the centerpiece. Your story, your journey, your food. With your permission, I'd like to photograph this dish, interview you properly about your background and aspirations." Maya nodded, still processing the reality that her food had impressed someone of his caliber. "Of course, yes. And," he continued, "I think there's potential for something more here. The magazine has connections throughout the culinary industry. I know several restaurant owners looking for fresh talent, especially for their development kitchens. With your permission, I'd like to make some introductions." The world seemed to tilt beneath Maya's feet. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "You would do that? For me?" Alex's expression softened. "Maya, talent like yours deserves recognition. The culinary world needs your voice, your perspective. All I'm doing is opening a door. You're the one with the ability to walk through it." Tears spilled onto Maya's cheeks before she could stop them. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed by the display of emotion. "I'm sorry. It's just, I'd given up on this dream. Convinced myself it wasn't practical, wasn't possible. Dreams rarely seem practical until they're realized." Alex's voice carried the weight of personal experience. "I recognize the hunger in you, not just to cook, but to create, to express. That hunger doesn't go away, no matter how deeply you try to bury it." He was right, of course. No matter how exhausted she'd been, how financially strained, how discouraged by circumstances, the desire to cook had remained a constant pulse beneath everything else, sometimes faint, but never extinguished. "What happens now?" Maya asked, suddenly aware that this moment represented a potential turning point in her life. Alex pulled out his phone. "Now, I call our photographer to capture this dish while it's still perfect. Then we sit down for a proper interview. And tomorrow, I start making those calls to my contacts in the industry." He paused, studying her expression. If that's what you want, was it what she wanted? The question seemed absurd on its surface. Of course, she wanted opportunity, recognition, a chance to pursue her passion professionally. But change, even positive change, carried its own anxieties. Her life at the diner was difficult but predictable. She understood its limitations, had adapted to its constraints. The path Alex offered was unknown, uncertain. Yet, as Maya looked at her dish, the physical manifestation of her creativity and skill, she knew there was only one answer. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger now. "That's what I want." Alex's smile returned. "Good. Then let's begin." The weeks that followed passed in a blur of activity and transformation. The article in Taste of the City magazine hit newsstands with Maya's story as its centerpiece, complete with professional photographs of her dish and a narrative that painted her as a culinary diamond in the rough, waiting to be discovered. Alex's prose was eloquent but honest, capturing both her talent and her struggles with equal sensitivity. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Job offers came from restaurants across the city, each more enticing than the last. Maya found herself in the unprecedented position of having options, of being able to choose rather than simply accept whatever was available. She gave notice at Carlisle's, where the manager, after reading the article, suddenly found numerous occasions to mention that he'd always seen potential in her. Lou, the cook, had gruffly congratulated her with a rare hug and the admission that he'd always known she was too good for this place. The position she ultimately accepted was at Lumiere, a well-respected restaurant known for its innovative approach to traditional techniques. The executive chef had been impressed not only by Alex's recommendation, but by Maya's performance during a trial shift, where she'd recreated her signature dish and assisted with dinner service. They offered her a position in their development kitchen, creating seasonal specials and contributing to menu planning, a role that offered both creative freedom and the opportunity to learn from established culinary professionals. 6 months after that rainy night when Alexander Reynolds had walked into Carlisle's diner, Maya stood in the gleaming kitchen of Lumiere, putting the finishing touches on a dish that would be featured as the evening's special. Her white chef's coat still felt foreign against her skin, the embroidered M. Diaz on the breast pocket, a constant reminder of how much had changed. "That looks beautiful, Maya." The voice belonged to Chef Laurent, the executive chef who had taken a chance on her. He approached her station, eyeing the plate with professional scrutiny. "The presentation has your signature elegance." Maya smiled, adjusting a microgreen with her tweezers. "Thank you, chef. I'm still fine-tuning the sauce, but I think it's almost there." "Don't overthink it. Your instincts are sound." He nodded toward the dining room. "Your fan is here again, by the way." Table 9. Maya glanced through the past to see Alex seated at his usual table, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed some papers. In the months since her career change, he had become something of a regular at Lumiere, often stopping by toward the end of service to taste her latest creations and offer constructive feedback. What had begun as a professional mentorship had gradually evolved into friendship. They shared a language of food and flavor, of creative ambition and technical precision. Through their conversations, Maya had learned the full story of his transition from chef to critic, the kitchen accident that had shattered his leg, requiring multiple surgeries and ending his ability to stand for long hours on the line. She'd come to understand his occasional brusqueness as the protective shell of someone who had also seen dreams derailed and had fought to rebuild a meaningful life. "I'll bring him the special myself," Maya said, preparing a fresh plate with extra care. When her work was complete for the evening, Maya removed her chef's coat and made her way to table 9, carrying her creation personally. Alex looked up as she approached, his smile warm with genuine pleasure at her appearance. "Chef Diaz," he greeted her, setting aside his papers. "To what do I owe this honor?" Maya set the plate before him, a delicate arrangement of sea bass with fennel and citrus, finished with a saffron-infused emulsion. "I wanted your opinion on the new special. It looks exquisite." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Join me? Unless you need to get back. My work is done for tonight." She slid into the seat, watching as he tasted her creation. Alex closed his eyes briefly as he savored the first bite, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his highest compliment, the moment when the flavor commanded his complete attention. When he opened them again, his expression confirmed what that momentary surrender had suggested. Remarkable balance. The acidity cuts through the richness perfectly. He took another bite, analyzing. The texture of the fish is impeccable, crisp exterior, moist center. You've really mastered the technique. Maya accepted the praise with a gracious nod, no longer overwhelmed by his approval but still valuing it deeply. I had an excellent teacher. You had raw talent and determination. I merely pointed it in the right direction. He set down his fork. Speaking of which, I heard from Chef Marino at Terroir yesterday. He mentioned they're looking for a sous chef. The position would involve more responsibility, more creative control. Maya raised an eyebrow. Are you trying to poach me from Lumiere already? I've only been here 6 months. Alex laughed, the sound warming the space between them. I'm not trying to do anything except ensure you know your options. Your trajectory doesn't need to plateau here unless that's what you want. It was a kindness typical of their evolving relationship. Alex continued to open doors without pushing her through them, offering opportunities while respecting her agency and choosing her own path. I'm happy at Lumiere for now, Maya said thoughtfully. I'm still learning, still growing. When that changes, I'll know it's time to move on. Alex nodded, understanding. Fair enough. He hesitated, then added, There's something else I wanted to discuss with you. A personal project I'm considering. Oh, Maya leaned forward, intrigued. I'm thinking about opening a small place. Nothing elaborate. A neighborhood restaurant focusing on honest, personal food. The kind that tells a story. He picked up his water glass, turning it slowly in his hands. I've been on the critical side of the industry for so long that I find myself wanting to contribute something more tangible. Not as a chef, my days in the kitchen are behind me, but as an owner, a curator of talent. Maya's eyes widened with surprise. This was the first he'd mentioned of such ambitions. That sounds wonderful, Alex. Your knowledge of the industry, your connections, you'd be uniquely positioned to create something special. That's the hope. He set down his glass, meeting her gaze directly. I'd want a chef partner, though. Someone with technical skill and creative vision. Someone who understands that food is more than sustenance. It's memory, it's connection, it's a form of communication. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Maya felt her pulse quicken as she realized what he was suggesting. Are you offering me a partnership? Alex's expression remained serious. Not yet. It's too soon for both of us. You need more experience, more time to develop your voice. I need to solidify the concept, secure investors, find the right location. But in a year or two, he trailed off, letting the possibility linger. A year or two, Maya repeated softly, allowing herself to imagine it. Her own kitchen, her own menu, her name not just embroidered on a coat but emblazoned on a restaurant door. Something to consider for the future, Alex said. No pressure, no expectations. Just a possibility I wanted to share with you. Maya nodded, touched by the trust this tentative offer represented. 6 months ago, she had been an exhausted waitress serving lukewarm meatloaf to a rude stranger. Now she was a chef with a future full of possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. Alex's expression softened. Thank yourself, Maya. I may have recognized your talent, but you're the one who had the courage to pursue it, to take the risk when opportunity presented itself. That's the hardest part, believing in your own potential enough to act on it. As they sat together in the warm glow of the restaurant, Maya reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her here. The exhaustion and disappointment, the daily struggle that had nearly extinguished her dreams, the random encounter that had reignited them. Life's pattern revealed itself not as a straight line, but as a complex tapestry of moments, choices, and connections, some painful, some beautiful, all necessary to create the whole. Outside the restaurant windows, the city lights shimmered against the darkening sky, the same city that had once seemed so indifferent to her struggles, now offering pathways to fulfillment she'd thought forever closed. And across from her sat the unlikely catalyst of her transformation, a food critic who had once been a chef, a stranger who had become a mentor, a rude customer who had changed her life. Maya raised her water glass in a small toast. To unlikely beginnings, Alex smiled, touching his glass to hers, and to extraordinary continuations. The gentle clink of glass against glass sealed a moment of perfect understanding between them. Two people connected by a shared language of food and creativity, of dreams lost and found again, of the profound way small acts of recognition can transform a life. For Maya, the journey was just beginning. The white chef's coat with her name stitched above the heart was not the destination, but merely the uniform for the next chapter of her story. a story that had been waiting to unfold all along, requiring only the courage to pursue it and the kindness of someone who recognized its worth.